friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Emily and this is my channel where I love to talk about all of the cozy, wholesome books that I love reading. Today's video is going to be all about a few different, I think I have like somewhere between 7 and 10 like books to read in the wintertime, and I'm just really excited to share them with you. I do apologize in advance. My husband and boys and I have all been fighting off this like sniffly cold, so you may be able to hear it a little bit in my voice, and I'm going to try as hard as I can to not sniffle throughout the video, but one or two is probably going to sneak its way in. So I do apologize for that. The other thing of note, very quickly, is I have my, no, you can't really see him. I have my baby down here on my lap here. He is close to being ready for his nap, but not quite, so I'm taking advantage of that to go ahead and film this video. But you may hear some baby noises. Let's go ahead and dive right into some fun wintry books. Now, most of these that I have picked have wintry, Christmassy, whatever depictions in them. There are a few of them that don't, but winter is usually a slower pace of life. There's not as much stuff that you can go and do and things. There's a lot more being stuck inside, that sort of thing. So sometimes there's a bit more time to tackle some bigger books or different books. So I have a couple of those types of books to recommend too. So let's just jump right in here. The first one I'm going to recommend is one of my beloved Louis L'Amour books. This is Bendigo Scheer, and I love Louis L'Amour. It's about time for me to start another reread of Louis L'Amour. It usually happens sometime in like January, February, so I'm very excited about that. But yes, Bendigo Scheer is one of his books that I would recommend as it being an excellent winter book, because there are a lot of descriptions of like wintertime and things that they're doing, like, you know, it's big snowstorms and they have to go out and rescue some children who got caught in this blizzard snowstorm, and you know, they're walking on snowshoes across the snow. Like, there's a lot of snowy times in this book, which is not terribly common for Louis L'Amour books. A lot of the Louis L'Amour books, you know, it's like the Old West. It's like cattle drives and deserts and hot and all of that stuff. This book has some of that, but there's a lot of wintry scenes in it. It's about Bendigo, or Ben as he's known, and he travels with his older brother Cain and Cain's family and a number of different people from a wagon train, and they stop and set up a town, and it's just kind of talking about what they have to do to survive in that town. And then at one point Bendigo has to go and he's doing a cattle drive to make some money for the town, and yeah, it's just a really, really good, lovely Louis L'Amour, Western cowboys, that sort of a book. It is a bit bigger as well than a lot of his other books, but it's so good. This is one of those ones where, because it's very much a coming of age type of a story, and I feel like every time I read through it, there's something else that I kind of pick up and I'm like, oh, that's such a good quote. Like, there's so many good moments in it. So, highly recommend that one. The next one that I want to recommend is part of a series, but you could very, very easily read it as a standalone. I believe this is the third book in the series, maybe? I think it's the third or the fourth. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's An Irish Country Girl, and this is in the An Irish Country Doctor series by Patrick Taylor. I love this series so much. I can't say that. I love the first half of the series that I have read. I have not gotten around to reading the second half of the series. There's so many books in so little time. However, this book in particular is a departure from the rest of the books, because in the main series, Dr. Fingal O'Reilly is he has a housekeeper named Mrs. Kincaid, and I think they call her Kinky for whatever reason. Yeah, they call her Kinky. But her name is Mrs. Kincaid. What's her first name? I can't remember that off the top of my head. But this one is set at Christmas time, and all the little children in the village have come, and they're doing like caroling, and then they stop by at the doctor's house, and Mrs. Kincaid like brings them in, and she's giving them like oranges and I don't know, like punch and like whatever. And so then they all ask her to tell her a story. And so then she tells them a story from her childhood, or not childhood, I guess it's her young womanhood, when she was a younger girl. And it goes back, it's set in Ireland, an Irish country girl, and it's very like folklorish. Like there's talk of like fairies and, you know, angering the fairies and ghosts, and it's a very atmospheric type of a story, and it's all about Christmas. Like it's specifically about, I think it's Christmas Eve or something. There's a couple different Christmas Eves, and so very, very wintry. And yes, oh, is that's what it is, Maureen? Yeah, she's called Kinky Kincaid, but her real name is Maureen. And I love it. It's so good. The whole series so far that I've read has been fantastic, but this one particularly is very, very wintry. And I believe there's another one that's called like an Irish Country Christmas or something. I don't think I've read that one yet, but this one's great. Yeah? You think it's good too? And while we're on the theme of like specifically Christmas books, we'll go ahead and talk about this one. The Christmas Mouse by Miss Reed. This is a very quick read. It's a lovely short, well, it's not really a short story, but it's a quick read. Like it does not take very long to read at all. And this is one of those books that is, if you haven't read any Miss Reed before, this is a standalone. This is not based off of one of her series. It is possible that there may be some characters that overlap. I haven't 100% read the other two series, but as far as I know, this one is completely a standalone. And this edition in particular is just so beautiful. Like, look at this. Look at this. There's a little mouse on there. It's so cute. But this is the story of a family. It's a mom and her daughter, and they're two, the daughter is a widow and she has two little girls, and it's all like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, like around Christmas, I think like a week or two before Christmas, like that sort of a thing. And at some point there's this little boy that shows up, this starving, hungry little boy, and he and the grandmother sit there and talk. Like it's a very slow-paced book in that not a lot of stuff happens. Like it's a very calm, cozy, relaxing, like really, really lovely sort of book, like English village life, that sort of a thing. And that's one of the things that I actually love about Miss Reed, is that of all of her books that I have read so far, they don't have like big adventurous things that happen. They're just very normal, ordinary, daily life sorts of stories. And I love that. I really appreciate it. But yes, this one is specifically around Christmas time. So there's talk of like the presents that the grandma and her daughter are making for the little girls and all that fun Christmassy stuff. Yeah. So I love this one. I think I read it for the first time last year or the year before. And it's really good. Okay, and then, let's see. So, we're gonna do a murder mystery. This is called Tied Up in Tinsel by Ngaio Marsh. This is one of the books in the Inspector Roderick Allen series. For one, again, I highly recommend the entire series. I've read all the books in the series. I've read some of them more than once. And this in particular is one that is set around Christmas time. Oh gosh, I just completely blanked on her name. Does it have it in the back? No, what is her name? Oh my goodness. Oh, Troy. That's what it is. Agatha Troy. But her nickname, they just call her Troy, which is really funny. But she is Roderick Allen's wife. And she has been invited to like sort of a house party thing, because I think there's this rich guy that wants her to paint his portrait. And Inspector Allen is off traveling or something. I can't remember now. Does it say? I think it may be during World War II or shortly after or whatever. So Inspector Allen is having to go and do something. So he and his wife have been separated for a good while because he's been having to do police work and stuff. And so she goes to this manor, and it's around Christmas time. It's all like snowy and icy and all that stuff. And then, of course, murder happens, and so then her husband gets called in, and there's a lot of sweet moments between Inspector Allen and his wife. They have one of the, I guess, most wholesome and wonderful relationships, I think, and when it comes to the Golden Age detectives that I have read. I just love their whole relationship and their banter and how respectful and loving and kind they are with each other. It's just wonderful. But then also just Inspector Allen, I think, I almost hate to say this because for years Sherlock Holmes has been my favorite sleuth. I think Inspector Allen is my favorite now. He is just amazing. I love him so much. Like, he is such a good character. And I love Niall Marsh's writing and everything. Highly recommend the whole series, but if you're looking specifically for a Christmassy one, and like technically you can read these out of order, they don't necessarily super tie into each other. They're fairly standalone. Oops, bumped the camera. But I personally prefer to read everything in the order, but this one is a very Christmassy, lovely one, and highly recommend it. The next book is almost kind of an honorary mention. Like, it's not necessarily a full... Well, I highly recommend it, but I'm pretty sure I talked about this in my 10 books to read for spring. I can't for 100% sure remember, and I didn't go and look it up, but I know everybody talks about this as being a fantastic spring book, but this is also a fantastic winter book. And it's Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I always want to say Kenneth Branagh, who is the actor, but it's Kenneth Grahame. This book has excellent depictions of spring, but also like the cozy winter where it talks about like Christmas time and Mole and Ratty are in like their burrow, and like this book in particular, this was the edition of The Wind in the Willows that I read, and the illustrations are stunning. They are just the most gorgeous thing ever. And yeah, like, it has a lot of very, very cozy, wintry scenes as well. So I do highly recommend it for this time of year, just as much as with springtime. It does a good job of describing both. And there's, like, yeah, like snowy, wintry scenes, and I have a wiggly child. But particularly, if you can get your hand on this edition with the illustrations by Robert and Ingpen, they're so good. They're so, so good. So, just wanted to kind of more briefly mention this because most people know what the story is about, but it also has fantastic wintry scenes. So, that's a great one. And then the next one, this is one that has a, what do you call it? Not disclaimer. Or maybe it's disclaimer. Or take it with a grain of salt sort of a thing. This is one of my favorite books. I have not read it in many years, but growing up we absolutely loved it. My mom and dad read it aloud to us at least once, if not 2 or 3 times. But it has some very, very sad themes in it. So, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. And that is Mrs. Mike by Benedict and Nancy Freedman. My edition doesn't really have anything on it. I bought this one just a couple months ago, which I'm so excited to have, because again, like I said, this is one of my all-time favorite books. And it's the story of, is it Kathleen? It's told, Catherine, that's what it is. It's told from the first person perspective, and Catherine is a young girl. She's like 16, 17, and she has been really sick, so she's going to stay with her Uncle John in Alaska for her health. Like, something about the air and stuff is better for her, and so she goes up there, and while she's there, she meets a Mountie, one of the mounted police, Mr. Mike. That's why it's called Mrs. Mike. Mike, is it Mike? I wanted to say Mike Mulligan, but that is a completely different book. Mike Mulligan and the Steam Show. What's his last name? Oh, goodness me. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's something like Irishy, I think. But anyway, she meets him, and they have this very sweet, like, romance at the very beginning of the book, and it's so cute. They decide to get married, and she goes with him, and he is a mounted police in the Canadian frontier. And so there's obviously lots of snow and all of that. This is a hard book in that this was very much frontier times. I don't remember if it specifies what year it is. Oh, okay, 1907. So where they go to live is it's like very remote. There's not a lot of medical assistance. Like, it's very primitive. And so there's some sad things where it involves like death and illness and all of that. But it is also at the same time, like, it is such a gripping story. And I think that this is actually based off of some real life experiences. So at one point there's like a forest fire, there's bear attacks, there's all kinds of stuff in it. But again, I would say definitely look up the trigger warnings, because it has some very sad moments. But Mike and Catherine have one of the sweetest romances, their relationships and stuff, and it's so wholesome and lovely that they are able to stick together through thick and thin with some truly horrible things happening to them. Things that I, desperately hope never happened to me and my husband, like that sort of thing. Like, it's very, very hard stuff, but I know I'm probably not selling it very well. It's such a good story, and some of the characters are just fantastic, and it has lots and lots of wintry, snow, cold, all of that stuff. There's that. And so to go to a much lighter and more, I don't know, even more wholesome book, this is one that has actually a couple different titles. I think there's a UK title and then there's a US title, and it's called Winter in Rough Weather, and it's a book by D.E. Stevenson. Technically, it is the last book in the... Victoria Cottage is the first book in the series, and then Music in the Hills is the second, and then Winter in Rough Weather is the third. And I can't remember exactly what the series is called. It's a fantastic series. Highly recommend it. Honestly, I would say read Victoria Cottage in spring, read Music in the Hills in the summer, autumn, and then Winter in Rough Weather, as you may guess by the title, is all about snow. It's like snowy stuff in Scotland, on a farm in Scotland, and how can you get better than that? It's a very sweet book. Again, not a whole lot of like crazy things happen. It's talking about a young farmer and his wife and their life together and the people in the village, and it's just so cozy, wholesome, wintry. It's fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I think it is something that I could see myself rereading the series next year. I read the series this year in like less than a week, I think. I read like all 3 books. Like, they're so good. Oh, I love them so much. But yeah, so I wanted to specifically mention that one because it is all about winter, and it's in Scotland. Again, like, it's in Scotland. How can you get better than that? So then the last 2 books that I have to recommend are both in that, like, not really wintry, but kind of more thought-provoking or just longer books. And they're pretty different, if I'm honest. I'll talk about this one first because it's one that I am currently reading through and I have a physical copy of, and that's called The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. This is a book that I have read and reread multiple times, and I am currently rereading it again. It is the story of Gretchen Rubin and how she goes through a whole year of tackling some different, I guess, goals and resolutions and things, and she tracks it to try and work towards being a happier person. And I love it. I find it so inspiring and encouraging, and I'm thinking about potentially trying to do a version of the Happiness Project for myself in 2025. So stay tuned for that. But I just find it to be a very encouraging and really nice book to read this time of year as we're getting ready to start a new year. So I just thought I'd recommend it. It was kind of a last minute addition to the list. And then the very last book that I wanted to recommend, which is one that I wholeheartedly recommend, it is so good, is Agatha Christie Autobiography. It's the autobiography that Agatha Christie wrote about herself and her life, and it is so good. And I put it in here because it is a chonker of a book. It is big. It took me a good while to get through it. Just not because it wasn't interesting. Like, it is so fascinating, and it is incredible to read about Agatha Christie in her own words. Like, I loved it. I would love to have a copy of my own. It's something that I'm working towards getting. But yeah, it's a big book, but it is so good. It talks about Agatha Christie's life all the way from when she was a child, to when she got married, to when she has a baby, to then when her horrible husband leaves her, and the struggles that she went through, like after her mom died, like all of it. And then when her second husband, Max, I think that I wish that there was like more about their relationship, because I think they're just so cute and so sweet, and I would love to read more about that. But yeah, it's so good. There's pictures in it, and oh, I love it. I love it. It was so fascinating to read about one of my all-time favorite authors in their own words, because most of my favorite authors are people that are long dead, that very much do not have any sort of autobiography or whatever. And so it was just really lovely to be able to read all about Agatha Christie. So yeah, I highly recommend that one. Like I said, it's a big book. It may take a while, so that's why this time of year is probably a good time of year to tackle it. And then I did lastly want to mention, this is not a book that I personally have read, but I have heard it very, very highly recommended, both in different YouTube videos and in the comments on my videos, and that is Winter Solstice by Rosamunde Pilcher. It is a book that I would love to get to. I thought I had a copy of it, but I actually don't. So I may try and see if I can get the Kindle edition of it, the ebook edition, and see if I can read it, because I've heard that it is a very, very good book, and it has come very highly recommended. So I may tackle that one. So that was not really necessarily on my recommended list, because I personally have not read it yet, but I've heard lots of good things about it. So there's that. But yeah, that is all that I have to talk about today. I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. I would love to know what sort of wintry Christmas books that you would recommend, and I hope that you all have a very, very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!